Okay, got yeah. I'm probably not even gonna look directly at the camera. Like the camera's right there. I'm probably gonna look right here because this is where my screen's at. You know. So yeah, I guess we'll just talk. Um, I wanted to talk to you today about a very prevalent problem that I see across basically everybody. You know, I see it both in my immediate circle and people old and young. I see it in almost everybody, which is this sort of perpetual consumption machine that everyone seems to be trapped in. You know, um, humans by definition are generative beings. Even if you look at like, let's just start it off, right? If you look at religion, the first thing that almost every religion will tell you is that you are a part of God, or that you are one with the gods, or that you and God, or the gods, or the divine are somehow connected. You know, that there's some sort of connection between human beings and the divine. And what that connection generally seems to be is this sort of generative principle. That being that, God creates, or the divine creates, it created the whole world, created you and I, it created everything. And you are connected to the divine because of your ability to create. And every being is generative, every being can create something. Um, but humans have like a bit more of a capacity to create than other beings. And that's sort of what gives us our spiritual powers, right? So, for example, a dog can't quite create as much as a human. Dogs can do incredible things. They're good for hunting, they're good for defending your household, defending your property, they're good for being lifelong companions, friends, they're being loyal. I'm sure they can partake in art in their like limited capacity with, like say you give your dog some paint, I'm sure they could put their paw in the paint and, dab it onto like a little canvas or something. But ultimately, humans have more of a capacity to create you know Humans are able to actually paint the Mona Lisa, actually able to paint Starry Night. They're able to bring these visions they have within themselves to life, which is ultimately a godly thing. The sort of creative divine power. And generally speaking, this power is being like siphoned out of humanity, because you look around and everyone is in a sort of, maybe I'm projecting here, everyone is in a sort of state of perpetual consumption, because yeah, I'm sure you've heard it a billion times. Your dopamine is being hijacked by these platforms. Your dopamine, your brain will always opt to do the easiest thing, to do the most pleasurable thing that's most readily, immediately available. And what that often is scrolling Instagram reels, scrolling TikTok, scrolling Twitter. Like these are the things that are most, that are the easiest, but people tend to lose themselves in those sorts of things. Like, and this has become a phenomena that as a kid, I never really experienced, but growing up, I see it more and more to where almost every person fits this sort of category, which is that like people aren't really individuals in the sense that they used to be. People before, everybody was like very unique, and people would be unique in the sense that, you know, you would talk to them and they'd have unique ideas of their own. Sure, like I'm sure even back in like Nietzsche's time or, back in the old days, people were like products of, the opinions that their parents would tell them, the opinions that like the news anchor would tell them or whatever, you know, or that the newspaper would tell them, right? But it seemed like people had more creative powers back then. People were more seamlessly themselves. And maybe I felt this way because I was a kid and kids maybe are more creative, though I don't really like that idea. It's not one that I necessarily believe, but it's one that's very commonly believed that kids are more creative than adults. Or that if you're a kid, you'll just be more creative than if you're an adult, like when you grow up. Um, Obviously, I don't like that idea because I don't like the idea that creative powers wane throughout your life. I'd like them to stay up here fucking forever, dude. But regardless, um, but yeah, people really seem to be individuals back in the day. But now it seems like people are just products of their algorithm. A lot of people that you talk to, I feel like they're literally a product of like whatever Instagram thinks that that person is, and they become that, or they become a product of what Twitter thinks they are, and then they become that, or whatever X social media that they use, they become that algorithm to where you can almost like categorically point at a person and say, oh, you are X type of person, you are Y type of person. You can just classify people, and it's you can almost even like blanket dismiss people. You know, I see this very commonly done in like politics, where oh, you voted for the other side. Well, I can dismiss you because you're clearly stupid. Or oh, you voted for this person. Wow, like you're very stupid, or whatever. You know, it happens very often on both sides, to where like it becomes like a blanket dismissal of an entire person. And to be fair, sometimes it's fair because it's like, you know, you don't really see people reading anymore. You know, maybe it's the environment that I'm in, but I don't really like walk around and see people reading books in public, or even in the library. I don't see people reading in the library anywhere really. I don't see people reading, and it's like, you know, you don't like reading ultimately becomes the same thing, where you just become like, you just become the ideas that you read. But you know, it can help you have ideas of your own. Like it's happened to me very often, where like what you read, you don't necessarily have to agree with. And for me, I've very often like disagreed with authors that I read, but just the act of reading gives me something to disagree with, and it gives me an opportunity to sort of develop my own ideas. And that's something that I feel like is very much missing, you know, because everybody is just consuming the ideas of others, but not really expanding upon their own ideas. And this constant cycle of, you know, consumption ultimately becomes very destructive. It almost like destroys who you are. I mean, it quite literally destroys who you are, because you go from being a person with unique thoughts and ideas to all of a sudden you can be filtered into this very narrow thing. And then that's what you are, you know, because if you agree with one thing, then oh, maybe the algorithm thinks you like this other thing, and then oh, you like that thing, well, maybe you like this other thing, and then you become X type of person or Y type of person, and it really strips you of like all individuality. um and it's very destructive, you know. I feel like this is why like a lot of what people think of as like self-care like needs to be more than just like doing a skincare routine, or it needs to be more than like just, I don't know, like making yourself feel good. You need to actually create something, you know, because if you don't use it, you lose it, you know. And this really, this sort of like consumption machine creates like a scenario in which people aren't even really the main characters of their own lives anymore, you know? Because it's like you talk to people, they're not even thinking about themselves, they're not thinking about their lives. Excuse me. They're not thinking about anything related to their personal reality. They're thinking about like Donald Trump. They're thinking about fucking public figures. You know, they're thinking about like Instagram reels that they saw, or they're thinking about tweets that they saw, or they're thinking about like X person that did something outrageous, you know? And so like they go to bed at night and they can't even like point to something they did. They can't even point to like something outrageous or spectacular or noteworthy that they did. It all becomes about other people. And then again, this becomes like a sort of destructive loop that destroys that person from the inside, because they're nothing, you know, they're nothing. They can create nothing. Well, everyone can create something, but they choose not to. You know, it's like, say you can read. What good is it to know how to read if you don't freaking read? You know, if you don't fucking read, you're just as good as someone who can't read, which is not very freaking good. That's terrible, you know? And it's the same for everything. It's like, say you know how to do math. Do you really know how to do math if you're not sitting down and actually solving freaking equations or whatever? No, you know? And it's like that with everything. It's like people aren't really rewarded for using their brains, you know? It's like, I'm not a big fan of Marx, but I feel like Marxism can be applied here, where everything's become very reductionist, and everything has really become about like, if there's no profit incentive, I don't want to do it. And everything has sort of become like a soulless machinistic thing, where oh, I'm just in it for the profit. You're just doing things for profit. Nobody generates things unless they get paid for it. And then the internet isn't even like it used to be anymore. You know, the world isn't what it used to be anymore. I remember when I was a kid, I would submit drawings to my local newspaper, and they would like they would select like the best drawings that were submitted by the kids, and they would post them. And like I remember one time they submitted my drawing to the newspaper, like they published it, and I was like so freaking ecstatic, so happy, you know. And like I feel like things like that, it's like there was no profit incentive. I was a little kid, I didn't even know what profit was, you know. But it's like I just did it for the joy of doing it, and that is something that's very lost, I feel like, because I mean, maybe this is exclusively a Western phenomenon. Maybe, you know, in Europe or in Asia, it's not really like this. It's probably like this, where, you know, Things just aren't done for profit. Things just aren't done unless there's a profit incentive, you know. And then this turns like you extrapolate that far enough, and eventually people can't even live unless they're getting paid to live. You know, people don't even want to make friends unless they're work friends, or unless those friends can make the money, or unless those friends can provide X, Y, or Z and value or opportunity or whatever. And ultimately becomes a very soulless endeavor. You know, I remember the old internet where, you know, ad revenue wasn't even a thing. People were shocked you could even make money off of YouTube, you know? And like people were posting on YouTube just for the fun of it. People were posting on YouTube just because like they had a funny idea and then they recorded it and then they would post it, you know? And like that's all YouTube was. It was a community of people that just had ideas and just posted them. You know, they just posted silly videos or they posted thoughtful videos, but like, you know, they put a lot of thought into it. There was no profit incentive. There was no anything. You know, it was just a pure expression, you know? Even something as simple as like say the first YouTube video where obviously this wasn't the purpose of it, but you know, the first YouTube video, if you were like a random person on the internet and you stumbled upon YouTube and you see, oh, what is this? Oh, this guy's at the zoo. Why is he at the zoo? Oh, he just wants to show me this like cool animal that he saw at the zoo. That's cool. This, even something silly like that, where it's like you're just sharing things with the world. I feel like even that most basic process isn't respected or partaken in anymore. And that's why people don't really even like the internet anymore. That's sort of what's made it so soulless, I feel like. I hate to use that word, but seriously, you know, you have like AI influencers, you have AI generated content, you have like, there's so many things where, you know, like I'm not an anti AI person, but it's like there's so many things that are so obviously done for no other reason than profit. And there's no purpose to them beyond just, you know what, this will get views and this would make me money. And it's really inverted the whole purpose of the internet, which was to share ideas and to sort of collectively grow as a species through our exchange of ideas. And now it's really, I don't know, it's just become decrepit. And there needs to be room for like pure expression. And I think people need to express themselves more. You know, that's what I'm doing. But even outside of the internet, it's like it needs to happen in some capacity or the other. Just sitting down and making a drawing, not even basing it off of anything else. Just, you know, a drawing based on what you want to draw, you know, or a drawing that's purely your own, even if it's bad. Just it's your own thing, you know, or like a journal, you know, you freaking sit down and journal for like a few pages. It's like people can't even write anymore. People can't even do math anymore. People can't fucking do anything anymore, dude. People aren't even bothered. They'd rather just sit down and scroll on TikTok infinitely, just be consumed by it. It's fucking sad. Um, I don't know. Is there a resolution to this? You know, I'm not really sure. I guess like the main resolution is that I've always been kind of this belief, you know, um, where the world is eventually just going to split into two different groups of people. It's going to be one group of people goes all in on the tech. You know, they go all in on the AI and they go all in. They get the freaking VR headsets. You know, they walk around with them. They have like, they're plugged in 24/7. They ask ChatGPT for every little thing. They maximize, eke out every last bit of performance they have in them with all this technology. They go all in. And there's going to be group B, which goes all zero on technology. And they just live. They live their lives. They use relatively little technology. They, I don't know, live on farms or something, or maybe it doesn't even have to be that extreme. They can just like go out, be a part of nature, and you know, use social media sparingly. I feel like there's going to be a big divide, and it has to happen that way because I don't know. I feel like there's a big split brewing in like the collective consciousness where like you have some people going all in, and you have other people that are tuning out. And I don't know. This whole thing with technology. I could talk about this at length in other videos, but it's really alienated people from the world. It's really alienated people from nature, really alienated people from like the natural order of things, you know? Where it's like previously, if you think about the ancients, you think about people like Plato or things like ancient Greece, it's like every single day was full of like rich, rich symbolism. For them, the gods were everywhere. For them, there was deep symbolism in almost every little thing. Everything was deeply meaningful, you know, and like really, like, people like to sort of dismiss ancient Greece, and they like to say, oh, well, I could have had some good ideas too if I was the 10th person to ever live. But seriously, you had a society that really was like the cradle of all of human civilization, and that's not for nothing. You know, they were they were like the most advanced society of the time, but also they set the tone for what the world is today. And that, I feel like that's due to like their that is due to their deep respect for the arts, for philosophy, you know, and for symbolism, and for seeing that symbolism everywhere, for having very deep, meaningful lives, to attributing meaning to a lot of things that maybe today we wouldn't attribute meaning to. In fact, like today, it seems like the standard point of view is just that like everything's meaningless, nothing really matters. Just be a hedonist, dude. Who cares? Just be a hedonist, bro. You know, whatever. Who cares? Scroll on Instagram reels 20 hours a day. Who cares? Are you living a good life? Are you able to get groceries? That's what matters. You know, philosophy in this economy? I think not. Like you have a lot of stuff like that. But really, it's like that's not really conducive to anything that would push humanity upwards and beyond, you know? Ultimately, like what made them so great was like their deep, deep curiosity. And this curiosity, I mean, curiosity for the world, really. That's like what made all the greats great. You know, you think Plato would have sat there and written so many books if he wasn't a deeply curious individual? You think Da Vinci would have been simultaneously like a great engineer and a great artist and a great sculptor and a great, I don't even know what else he was, if he wasn't a deeply curious person? You think Einstein would have come up with relativity if he wasn't a deeply curious person? It's like these things come out of a sense of curiosity, but drowning yourself in this freaking cesspool of content and bullshit suppresses your own curiosity because you're curious about the world. It's like natural, it's intuitive. It's actually why you even go on Instagram in the first place, is because you go on Instagram because there's something that you want to see. There's something that you want to see. And you think, okay, maybe I'll come up on like an informative video. Or maybe, this will take the edge off. It can really be that simple. Um, but this deep curiosity feels like it's not really nurtured as it used to be. It's what it is. This curiosity doesn't really get nurtured as much. And people aren't really encouraged to follow their curiosity. In fact, they're almost dissuaded from it. Like, oh, you're interested in, I don't know, literature? That doesn't make any money, dude. Go study freaking mechanical engineering, man. That'll make you some money, you know? Or, oh, you're interested in math? Really? Math? You know what? How about you put that math into some sort of finance thing? How about you relate that to finance? How about you make some money, huh? Seriously. And everything really just gets sucked down this Marxist point of view where everything is about extracting value, gaining resources, and really nothing is done for the joy of itself anymore. Um, yeah. What's the solution? I don't know. Go into the woods, man. Go into the woods. Go walk around a little bit. Touch some grass. Freaking walk your dog. That's the solution. You want to talk about the solution? Sit down and write on your journal. You know, the solution. I mean, just be a deeply curious individual and try to like satisfy your desires in a way other than infinite scrolling. you know, try to satisfy that curiosity in a way that becomes meaningful. Not in a way where it's just immediately quenched. Try to do it in a way that gives you some sort of an experience. You know, take a road trip, do something like that. You know, that's ultimately the solution. It's like, and really, the solution. That's where life is. you, you want to talk about a life well lived. That's where it happens. It doesn't happen on Instagram. It doesn't happen scrolling TikTok. It happens when you veer outside of those things. You want to get away from it all. And you say, you know what, I'm going on a cross country road trip. That's where life happens. You say, you know what, screw it all. No internet for the next 6 months. I'm writing a book. That's where life happens. You say, screw it. I'm going into the woods. you know, I'm learning how to make a bow and arrow from scratch. That's where life happens. Seriously. So if you feel like you're getting too caught up in this freaking rabbit hole, you're getting too caught up in this fucking bullshit machine, you know, where it's just like the same freaking Southeast Asian AI generated content, you know, that's where you solve that. You know, America generates a lot of AI generated content too, but anyway, that's where life happens, man. that's really where, you know, a lot of deeper, more meaningful things come out of, you know. Because it's like, you know, you ever read the Bible, or you read like, not even just the Bible, you ever read like Greek mythology, you know, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, and you think, wow, like the gods, the divine, that all seems so real to them. Were they all hallucinating or something? No, it's that when you're not constantly distracted, when you're not constantly, you know, drowning your mind in bullshit, you can actually, like, a lot of that stuff becomes real. You know, a lot of that stuff really, you become more sensitive to it. You know, you talk to like any person that's like lived around the woods, say like the Appalachian Mountains or something like that. It's like they'll tell you weird things. They'll tell you like, oh yeah, there's like for example, a lot of like the old Irish tales are about like fairies and you know spirits of the woods and things like that. Or all of it was every single person in Ireland just freaking doing mushrooms or something. Probably not. What like these things were probably very real to them because they were probably a lot more sensitive to those things. You know, they weren't constantly dulling their senses. It's like now, like in our generation, it's like if you can sit down and write an essay just off the cuff, wow, that's like you're incredible. You're really not brain rotted whatsoever. But back then, not only was that the norm, that was like not only was that like the bare minimum, but it's like their sensitivity went so much more beyond that, where like you know these things were just real. These things were just real to them, and I feel like that's also where a lot of this sort of meaninglessness comes from, or this idea that things are meaningless, is that people feel disconnected from like the mystery and the divinity of it all, and like the fun, the wonder behind it. You know, they think it doesn't matter, or they think if it wasn't real, all of these people were hallucinating. The world is actually, you know, physical, solid. Like, I can grab this can with my bare hands, and it's only here because I can measure it with like a mathematical formula. I take the integral of 2 pi or whatever, I can measure it. It's like, I don't know, everything's just become about observable reality. And there's been no room left to explore what else is there, what else is beyond, what lies further. You know, it's all become about observable reality to the point where like a lot of things that like would have been common sense back in the day or would have been like basic knowledge or things that were just taken as fact now are like highly contested things. And is this really a problem? I guess I would say so because it's like you know you can't even agree on like the most basic things. Like for example, quantum mechanics and stuff like that, like fields like this that are like at the forefront, at the edge of everything that is freaking real, of observable reality. They keep proving mystics and Buddhists from 5,000 years ago, they keep proving them right every time. Like they're endlessly vindicated. And it's like, you know, did we really need to wait 5,000 years to accept this thing that was, you know, known in India and China and wherever else for thousands of years? Did we really need to wait 5,000 years to accept this as a fact? Could we not have just accepted it and moved on, you know? Could we not have explored it for ourselves and taken it to be true and then explored further from there? Did we really need 5,000 years and like billions of dollars of equipment to say, okay, maybe that guy that was sitting in a cave 5,000 years ago was right? You know, I don't know. You can really have some liberty there. You can really explore ideas and have fun with them. You know, like everything is so rigid and so serious. I feel like it's because of this need for everything to be provable and solid and material. Because I don't know, it becomes like a shitty Marxist loop over and over and over again. You know, where it's like, oh, well, you know, this scientific idea is valuable, but if and only if it can produce missiles, or if and only if it can produce trains that are marginally faster, or whatever. I don't know. It's silly. Um, we're at 37 minutes. I think that'll be it for today. Anyways, check out my other Marxist soulless content. Check it out. Um, yeah.